Good evening, it's 5:30. I'm going to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. We do have a quorum present. The first item on the agenda is to consider the minutes for the April 16th, 2024 regular meeting. If there are no additions or corrections, may I have a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Motion's by Karen.
Second.
Second by Rick. We didn't vote.
I got it.
I didn't.
Well, that's because you're not moving.
Well, I got fixed. I'm not coming up as getting a vote.
Tell me your vote, Mary Ellen, record it.
Aye.
She got you in there.
Okay, good. Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Next item is a regular hearing for a final plat of the Cricket Complex Lot 1 Block A on 3.145 acres out of the Samuel M. Hayden Survey. Abstract number 537, zoned light industrial district located on the east side of Barfneck Lane, approximately 1550 feet south of Midway Road.
Good evening, Commissioners. The final plat of the Cricket Complex was submitted on April 3rd, 2024, and has been reviewed by staff. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission disapprove the final plat of the Cricket Complex for the deficiencies list and delegate to the staff the authority to accept and approve the plat once the listed deficiencies are corrected. The approved plat will be brought to the chair for signature.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Any discussion on this? And if not, may I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Motion by Rick. You have to read off.
I'm going to. I'm just, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Motion to disapprove the final plat of Cricket Complex for the deficiencies listed above and delegate to staff the authority to accept and approve the plat once the listed deficiencies are corrected.
Second.
Second by Francis. I guess keep saying. Michelle, I vote aye. Motion 5-0 passes 5-0. Next item is also a regular hearing, consideration of 2 alternative standards associated with screening and lighting standards for a proposed commercial building on a 3.29 acre lot, legally described as the Blake C. Bowen Addition, Block A, Lot 2, located on the north side of Justin Road, FM 407, approximately 400 feet west of I-35E. This is zoned light industrial district as requested by Samuel Mortimer, Planning Agency LLC, on behalf of Lewisville 407 and 35 Partnership, the property owner.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this is alternative standards for a property that we have actually seen before, but it's a property that has a number of easements that really impact the development of the property. So see on the exhibit before you, I've highlighted in yellow the area that is unencumbered by easements, which is where they've managed to put the building for the most part. And so as we've moved through the process, they did get 4 alternative standards previously, but as they've finalized the site layout, the transformer box needs to be located in one of these areas as well, which won't meet our location screening requirements. And so they are asking for an alternative standard to allow the transformer box to be screened with an alternative method, which I'll show you in a minute. They're also having trouble getting the illumination to the 0.5 foot candle minimum at the northwest and the southeast corners of the site. And I'll just show you that in just a second here. So this is the illumination. You can see the illumination's primarily on the building because they can't really locate any features inside the right-of-way or in other areas. You can see just a little bit dark at the southeast and the northwest corner. We're hopeful that when other adjacent properties develop, that their lighting and illumination will help pick up for some of that deficit. And then in terms of the screening of the transformer box, since it has to be along the area that is basically being treated like the pedestrian way, we do want to screen that as much as we can from the street. And so they're proposing this sort of fencing system as opposed to masonry, which would just take up too much space and you wouldn't get the clearance from the transformers. So this is kind of a different sort of screening system that they would like to use, and the panel system that they would screen on the outward-facing sides of where that transformer box is going. So I am here, and I believe the applicant is here if you have any questions as well.
Commissioners, any questions or discussion on this item?
No.
Michelle, where is the transformer on the site plan? With
Yeah,
the
I'm trying to
enclosure?
get to that. Just give me 1 second. This is
The
a little
trash
bit tricky.
dumpster's at the northeast corner, correct?
Yeah, so the transformer is going here, kind of at the northeast corner of the building, right near where the parking is. They've actually moved their features, including their benches, down. They've lost a couple parking spaces that were not minimum required parking in order to move those benches down and then accommodate the transformer on the north. And you can see they've got the screening on the on the west and the south side of the transformer to screen it from that pedestrian area and from where you'd be driving through. It is not screened on the north side of the building or where it faces the building. That's to allow access and clearances.
This is a three-phase pad-mounted transformer?
I could not answer that question, but it is a larger one.
Yeah, and then the wall itself is going to be at least 5 feet off of it?
It is meeting whatever the minimum clearance is with Texas, New Mexico, because it's a Texas, New Mexico power, and I know they have some fairly stringent standards on that.
I guess part of the issue here is that we need to screen it, but the screen becomes more obtrusive than likely the equipment itself.
So it's supposed to be located behind the building, which it cannot be in this case. And so if it's not located behind the building, it needs to be screened, usually with live screening, but there's not really adequate space for live screening. And so we're using this alternative method that's more of like a paneling to screen it so that it's at least a little bit more aesthetic than the transformer box itself. But hopefully it ties in a little bit better with the building.
And is it just a two-sided screen? Is that what the...
That's correct,
Okay.
on the west and south sides.
And how tall is it, the screen? 6
The
feet?
screening,
Also, the final height of the transformer, I believe it's
5.
7 or 8 feet.
Okay.
And one comment on the material choice, that's it's a fiber cement product. The goal, I believe, of the PC alternative standard provision is that it needs to relate back to the pallet of the building. We have an accent material running across the horizontal fiber cement board running across the top of the building, so trying to tie into that rather than we wouldn't have a CMU on the building.
Yeah, okay.
I can say it all again.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think y'all have taken the right approach. I'm just looking to see if there was an alternate way of using actual landscaping to help screen something like this versus...
We did look at, can you see my mouse here? We did look at potentially putting landscaping here where we have space for it. To me, that seemed like, I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing, but the island in between the access drive, that seemed like it wouldn't functionally accomplish the goal given the distance away from the transformer that we're trying to screen is. But you're correct, the distance here is it's a 5-foot offset. It's an 8x8 nominal size transformer. Worth noting potentially, directly across the street, the switchgear that we're going to be pulling on that's existing is 40 feet away and it's unscreened currently.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not proposing, well, they're siblings, they want to look the same. That's not what I'm saying, but I think that the proposal we have does tie into the material palette of the building. We've tried to be as aggressive as we could in terms of providing that on the west side and the south side, where, you know, those are the thoroughfares that we're required to screen from. We probably would functionally screen it on the north side if we could. We just can't fit it in there given the access requirements. That's one reason why it's rotated 90 degrees rather than facing west.
Yeah, the doors open
for
to
the
the
service entry.
Okay. All right, well, that's thorough. I just wanted to make sure that you did exhaust the options for landscaping versus for the wall, 6-7 foot high wall. It's going to read like it's a trash enclosure from
Essentially,
the
yeah.
street, basically. That's what I was curious of trying to avoid.
Could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Samuel Mortimer. I live at 1623 Main Street, Dallas, Texas, 75201.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I had a quick question. So other than the power company having requirements about the distance between the transformer and the fence, do they have any other requirements about as far as what the material has to be for the fence, or do they care? Or
We never seriously considered landscape in this area just because it would be difficult to squeeze in. Different companies have different requirements in terms of you can plant landscape there, but they reserve the full right to come in and kind of trample all over it, which can kind of work if you're talking about, you know, low ground cover kind of things, but that doesn't obviously provide the screening that we're going for. So we started at a solid screening where we are now.
so, but they don't care what the material is for the screening, or they don't have any requirements? around
No, I mean there are some requirements in terms of like fire distances, that sort of thing. But once you're out of that area, it's pretty much carte blanche, is my understanding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, commissioners?
No, that's all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mortimer. May I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve with the 2 alternative standards.
Motion is by Francis.
Second.
Second by Karen. I vote aye. It was not coming up on my screen. Motion passes 5-0.
Commissioners, this item will be considered by the City Council for a final decision on Monday, May the 20th, 2024 at 7:00 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And our next item is another regular hearing. This is consideration of one alternative standard associated with landscaping standards for a restaurant on a 4.476 acre tract legally described as lots 3, 4, and 5, Block A. This is Zone General Business District, located at 724 West Main, on the south side of West Main, approximately 600 feet west of Edmonds Lane, as requested by Polo Padilla, ID Studio 4, on behalf of Dave's Hot Chicken, the property lessee.
Good evening, Commissioners. This item is to make a recommendation on the request at 724 West Main Street. Dave's Hot Chicken is a new restaurant use opening in an existing suite where, based on the degree of facade changes, the Unified Development Code's applicability matrix for I-35 requires that the landscaping standards be met. Since the site is already developed and they're just going to be leasing the space, it would add an undue cost to the property owner to meet those standards across the entire frontage of the property. And so the property owner engaged in discussions with staff to find an alternative standard that would work. What the property owner is proposing is to replace the required landscape trees on the frontage, as well as the landscape island with a canopy tree, with 3 live oak trees. Can show that to you. No? Okay. Well, here we go. Okay. So here's the locations. In yellow, it's kind of hard to see there where they're proposing to add the trees. 2 of these new trees will be within this existing landscape island, and this one other tree, they will be digging out the concrete and making that a landscape area. Staff feels that this request is consistent with the Unified Development Code and the comprehensive plan as well as other development regulations for this zoning district. And we recommend approval of the alternative standard as presented, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. We recommend that you recommend approval, I should say.
Commissioners, any discussion or questions on this item?
So it appears that 2 of the trees would be located in an existing grass island area. One of them, though, appears to be suggested in a concrete island. Is that
They're going to be digging out the concrete and
deconstruct it and then sod around it? Okay. Okay, I just wanted to double check. Because there won't be any irrigation. I think I saw a note in there about that, right? Yeah, no irrigation.
There's
What's the
already
reason?
irrigation existing in the grassed area, so they'll probably just be running out bubbler heads for the trees. And similarly, where they're tearing out the concrete to create more of a landscaped island, the shrub row is irrigated, so they'll just be pulling from that to add another bubbler head for that tree and area.
Anything else? Anybody?
Move to approve.
Motion is by Karen,
Second.
second by Francis. I'm still not getting a vote, so aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Commissioners, this item will be considered by the City Council for a final decision on Monday, May 20th, 2024 at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing. This is in consideration of a special use permit for a motor freight terminal on approximately 8.53 acres, legally described as Lot 2, Block E, Waters Ridge Phase 1, located at 1600 South Stemmons Freeway. This is zoned light industrial district as requested by Jessica Bro of Amazon on behalf of ALM Lewisville LLC, the property owner.
Good evening, Commissioners. First, I'd like to go on a little bit of history about this area and this site itself. So back in 2020, Amazon began operating a last mile delivery operation out of 1303 Ridgeview Drive, which is the property directly east of what's noted on this screen. So during this time, the business began parking delivery trucks at 1600 South Stemmons, the property we're speaking of today, without permit. Since it was in close proximity to the warehouse itself. In early 2021, the movie theater was demolished, and at this time, staff reached out to the business to bring the site into compliance. We went through a process of several pre-development meetings and up to an engineering site plan, which went through plan review and ultimately was approved by city staff. But no work was ever completed as noted by the engineering site plan. In July of 2023, staff met with the applicant again to start the process to bring the site back into compliance as the engineering site plan is valid for a period of time. But since the last engineering site plan was approved, our Unified Development Code had been adopted, which now provided the use of motor freight terminal, which requires the approval of a special use permit. The applicant has now requested a special use permit for a motor freight terminal at this site to bring the area up to compliance. So this property is located in Lewisville's I-35 overlay in the transition sub-district, but it does not have any frontage on public right-of-way. With the approval of the SUP, the site will be reconfigured to allow additional delivery vehicles, and also will be bringing many tree islands and trees to the site. As this site is directly connected to 1303 through the ADA requirements, they are providing access, which I do not have on these sheets. They are providing access to the warehouse and staff is requiring that a restaurant, basically a restroom agreement, be filed with the county that allows all the delivery truck drivers access to restroom facilities. This agreement will be filed during the engineering site plan process. I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding this SCP. The applicant is here as well.
Commissioners, any questions for staff or the applicant?
I don't believe so, no.
No? Okay, if there are no questions or discussion, may I have a motion, please?
Public hearing. We do need to
I'm sorry.
open the public.
I'm sorry. Yes, it is. You're right. I forgot already. Okay, now at this time, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Having no one come forward, I will now close the public hearing. Now, commissioners, if there are no questions or discussion, may I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion is by Karen,
Second.
second by Rick. I vote aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And finally, tonight, we have one more public hearing.
Was that vote to close the public hearing or to make the recommendation?
Just to make a
recommendation.
recommendation.
The recommendation. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That item will be considered by the City Council, who will hold a second public hearing, and they'll be making a final decision on Monday, June the 3rd, 2024 at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. All right. The next public hearing is a consideration of a special use permit for manufacturing medium intensity on approximately 9.65 acres, legally described as Bison Grove Business Park Addition, Lot 2, Block A, located at 701 Spinks Road. This is zoned light industrial district as requested by Casey Gregory of Sanchez and Associates on behalf of Centerpoint Properties Trust, the property owner.
Commissioners, Green Valley Products is a manufacturer of spray foam insulation. They're looking to operate out of the Bison Grove Business Park off of Round Grove and Edmonds Lane. With the adoption of the Unified Development Code, we now have designations between light, medium, and heavy manufacturing. Staff has reviewed this use and has determined that they fall under the medium manufacturing definition, which does require the approval of an SUP before they are allowed to operate. So the Green Valley Products operations involves the blending of resin and the generation of spray foam insulation. It is a closed loop system, so it does not have any discharge and no chemical reactions are taking place during the process, and everything is internal to the building itself. The only exterior use of the building will be the loading and unloading of materials in the truck court. Lewisville's building official and fire marshal have reviewed this operation into pre-treatment staff and are included in the certificate of occupancy permit process. I am happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well to answer any questions you may have.
Do we know if there will be any materials ever stored outside overnight?
No, there is no outdoor storage of any materials.
Okay.
How big is the company? How many employees do they have, or do we know that? Or
Sure, that was included in the letter. It's 16 employees in the office and 7 employees in the shipping.
What is this insulation typically used for?
Sure, I will refer the applicant.
Good evening. Casey Gregory with Sanchez & Associates at 210 Adriatic Parkway in McKinney. The spray foam insulation is used in construction of all kinds of buildings, commercial, residential, multifamily. The way the process works, it's a two-part chemical, and the manufacturing actually happens at the construction site. The chemicals are mixed on site, and once the chemicals are mixed, they create a foam. The foam expands and rapidly hardens into the actual insulation. So what happens at the facility itself is just the preparation of the base materials, the base chemicals.
Okay. Are any of these chemicals on the registration for perhaps dangerous chemicals or possible?
That should be listed, that would be listed.
So Mary Ellen, I'll let you know, as part of their certificate of occupancy, the certificate of occupancy process, which is how we determined that this use needed to come in for a special use permit. It was also looked at by Public Services for any industrial pretreatment concerns.
Okay.
And so they're working through those separately, anything that they need to do in the way of industrial pretreatment. And then Tom Legler, our fire marshal, is here, and he can also speak to any of the fire code requirements that they may have.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Questions, discussion? Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please come up, state your name, sign in, and we'll be happy to hear from you. And having no one come forward, I will now go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, if there are no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Okay, move that over to.
Oh, sorry. Then I second.
Okay, motion is by Rick, Francis is second. My vote is aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Commissioners, this item will be considered by the City Council, who will hold a public hearing and be making a final decision on Monday, May the 20th, 2024 at 7:00 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, final item on the agenda tonight is adjournment. May I have a motion, please?
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Karen.
Second.
Second by Francis. I also vote aye. Motion passes 5-0. We are adjourned.
Hi, ready? We got it. Grab some handle. All right, it's 6 o'clock, and we're going to call this called special joint meeting of the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Apparently, we have a quorum.
Yes, we do. Didn't we sit together? Did you? I think I did. Yeah, with me. Nice to see you.
All right, did we have any comments prior submitted, City Secretary? No, sir. Thank you. All right, workshop session, we have 2 items. The first one will be to discuss and provide direction on the Business 121 corridor plan. So, who from staff is going to be running that?
Hi.
Awesome.
So, Michelle O'Berry, planning manager with the city of Lewisville. I'm going to also just try to get a couple
things going, because I'm happy to bring together this joint work session tonight. I'm really excited about the plan of progress. We have our consultant team here, and they're going to give through a presentation. Hopefully we have some discussion and get some direction from you all about where we're going with the Business 121 corridor and different sites. And at the end, I'm actually going to be opening up a Zoom link, because one of the consultants who is not physically here tonight is going to give us a little demonstration of ARC Urban and how we're using that in this corridor planning process. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kendall, there she is, with Half & Associates, who is our lead on this project.
Thank you, Michelle, and good evening, council members and commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. So again, my name is Kendall with Half Associates. We also have Kaylee and Aspen from Half, and then Scott and Michaela from Interface Studios. So we'll be just providing a brief update on on our project status. So really the focus of tonight is going to be on the corridor framework. So since we last met with council at the retreat, we have started to generate some ideas as they relate to recommendations for the neighborhood and mobility framework along the 121 corridor. And then we're also going to showcase the draft scenarios that we've developed so far for the catalytic sites. So I think the commissioners have been briefed by staff on kind of the overview of this project, so I'm going to breeze through these next few slides. But just to reorient you, we are looking at the entire stretch of the Business 121 corridor as it goes through the city of Lewisville, focusing on opportunities to improve aesthetics, safety, and economic vitality within the corridor.
Sorry, y'all, I'm just going to fix something real fast. I'm so sorry.
And so what we are, where we're at in the process, we're wrapping up the envision phase. The next phase will be focused on developing the implementation strategies and putting everything into final plan documents. We are anticipating wrapping up this study towards the end of this year. So council, you have seen this vision statement. We have an overarching vision statement for the corridor that is focused on Business 121 as a vital transportation corridor, a vibrant place to live and do business, and a proud gateway into Lewisville. And then that is supported by 3 key themes related to focusing on mobility improvements, quality of place improvements, and economic vitality policies. So as we begin to draft strategies, the strategies will be related to one of these 3 key themes. We did present this vision statement and the key themes at Colorpalooza. We did have a booth there last week or so, and we got some great feedback from residents in terms of where they think these certain key themes, whether it be mobility, quality of place, or economic vitality, where along the corridor those should be prioritized. So we got some great feedback from that opportunity. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michaela to talk to the corridor framework. I'm actually going to make this full screen as you. Thank you. So then you should be able to see.
Hi. Okay. My name is Michaela. You can interrupt me if you like, but I'm going to breeze through a couple slides on how we're defining the future character and vision for beautification and other land use improvements in the corridor. So first off, why are we here and what are we trying to accomplish? You all know this, but we look at the history of the corridor and how its development impacts people's experience today. We know that Business 121 developed in part due to its proximity to Dallas Airport, and all this industrial activity, which has been a great tax base for the city, has impacted the corridor in that as we now look at it today, we are looking at residential neighborhoods, some of which are quite dense, lots of shopping centers, and this industrial land use. There's a lot of tensions between those different land uses that we're looking at and mitigating that and imagining how some of those uses might change in the future. So we're looking at 5 main framework goals. The first is, oh great, it's there for me to see. The first is to enhance links to Old Town. So we've talked a little bit about the history internally of plans for Mill Street, but we haven't talked a lot about Main Street until now. We'd love to talk about kind of creating a dumbbell effect where both Mill and Main are really proper entrances, showcasing Lewisville and helping someone who sees Business 121 first before Old Town enter Old Town and enter Lewisville in a totally different way. The second is upgrading and unifying the core, which really means 2 things. The core between East Valley Ridge Parkway and 3040 is where really people are living. It's where people are going to work and where they're going to shop. And so looking at that core area and talk about upgrading property and buildings is one facet of this project. And the other is adding a human scale element that has been missing in part because it is car oriented. Oops, there's 3 more. The other is really focusing and acknowledging all of the residential areas on Business 121 within that half-mile corridor. There are lots of families, children's, there's schools, there's bus routes for kids to get on and off the bus right on Business 121. And so we're going to talk a little bit about different human scale elements that can help make those areas safer for neighborhoods and what they're looking for. Finally, one of the big moves for the city plan is to create more trails and more active transit. So finding ways that Business 121 can support that endeavor. And then finally, introducing Lewisville through some of the gateways that also have been identified through the city's plan and big moves. So what might we do? Talking about enhancing links to Old Town, we're going to focus really on both Old Town and the DCTA station. Creating those links a lot through focused improvements to private property by engaging with private property, or perhaps looking at more long-term transformation through some policy change. Adding some branding and some art to really catalyze the roadway. So looking at some of the industrial murals or the neighborhood murals, those are opportunities at some of those strong corners. And then we're going to talk in just a few minutes about how catalyzing redevelopment and focusing on a couple catalyst sites that we've selected are 3, there's 3, can also enhance some of those links to Old Town. Just zooming in, because this is so important, right now there's an I-35 underpass public art and sidewalk expansion project and a lot of history around building a new gateway entrance to Mill Street, wanting to build off that momentum, really to connect some of these main catalyst sites, this one here at the Mill Street redevelopment area, and this one here at the Lakeland and Bel Air site that we will talk about again in a few minutes. And acknowledging that there are also many businesses here, and only 36% of the sidewalks, of the roadway has sidewalks. And there are really strong desire lines for pedestrians who do walk in this area a lot. And so using this area to really build out and connect the pedestrian network. Unifying the core activity area through building and property improvements can include things like landscaping and screening from a design perspective. It can also include looking at right-sizing parking lots in the long term through code changes and encouraging developers in future scenarios to redesign their sites differently. It can also look like creating property owner partnerships to create pop-ups or just fully redressing some of the buildings. Unifying also means looking at the human scale elements, which can help with pedestrian activity and also some of the local businesses by increasing visibility to local businesses, to sites, helping people access those storefronts if they're walking from across the street. And that looks like creating signage that's visible from the car, but also the pedestrian scale, and filling in some of the gaps in the street light network, particularly here in this core area. Taking a step back from commercial property and looking into corridor neighborhoods and their needs, pedestrian we had a large conversation today about the tensions between pedestrian infrastructure and car infrastructure and what that means for the future of Business 121. When it came to considering additional crossings or potentially, looking at bridges over Business 121 and how that would impact the experience of the street has been a topic of today. The road can be also 80 to 100 feet wide, so if you are using a wheelchair or walking with little kids or you're elderly in the heat, there's opportunities for more pedestrian refuges on some of the medians, and that's all on the table. And then there are sidewalks in many different commercial areas, but there could be opportunity to connect to the retail storefronts more, so that's a focus. And then one of the city's plans is to have big moves is to have within every resident a 10-minute walk to a park or an open space. And so there's ways and sites on Business 121 to do that and making walking more comfortable. One example opportunity would be looking at the area south of Corporate Drive, where there can be almost a half mile in between crossings, and people are crossing the road at the intersections and also mid-block. And adding some additional pedestrian infrastructure, looking at coloring the street to make it really clear how pedestrians can navigate different shopping center parking lots that can be over a football field wide and really uncomfortable to cross. And then activating those spaces for children who are right now using parking lots at CPS to play. Second to last is connecting to active transit and recreation at Layla or potentially future landfill sites, and really just finding ways to add visibility or actually adding spaces to park and get out and get into a trail on Business 121. And then finally, another big move for the city is adding gateways. What better way to do so than with such a high visibility corridor? And that can be done through green spaces, green infrastructure, art, and branding, really just to help create a place that is more of a destination to arrive to than a place that people just drive through. So encouraging people to stop and go to businesses as well. This is a 20-year plan, of course, so looking into 2045, we've developed 9 different place types that could describe different density, different height, use types, and really, when it's all put together in a map, can tell you what areas of Business 121 might change and what might stay the same. So for example, just a quick highlight reel, some of the areas south of here that are residential are seen as staying that way. And some areas closer to Old Town right now that are primarily industrial or industrial adjacent can be looking at more commercial or mixed use. And right now I'm going to hand it off back to Kendall to talk about mobility.
All right, thank you. All right, so similar to what Michaela just went through for the neighborhood framework, I'm going to go over some big ideas on the mobility side as well. So just keeping in mind that this is a text-out roadway, so any sort of improvements would need to be initiated and made improvements by TxDOT. But there are some recommendations that we can start to introduce in this plan to help improve things like access management, safety, and traffic flow. So what this map is showing are some of the key goals related to mobility. So in terms of access management, that's shown in the orange color there. So where we see the most issues related to accessing properties is really in the Old Town Central sub-area and then the Corporate Drive study area, so just north and south of I-35. So looking at opportunities to potentially consolidate driveways and just make the access more managed within that area. There are over 150 driveways along the corridor. Many of them are very close to signalized intersections, which poses traffic and safety issues. As part of this process, in terms of safety, we did do a high-level intersection audit at all of the 15 signalized intersections that are located along the corridor. And so we have these symbolized on this map just based on the overall safety issues. So the intersections indicated in red typically have higher instances of crashes. Traffic flow improvements, not surprisingly, the area that's highlighted there is just to the north and south of 35. This is where you see a lot of congestion and also a denser concentration of signalized intersections. So what that ends up happening or causing is a lot of queuing at the lights and lots of backups as you wait to get through several light cycles. Also in terms of bottlenecks in the southwestern end of the corridor, as you approach the merge with the Sam Rayburn Tollway, there are some peak level congestion issues in that area as well. So looking at some strategies to improve congestion in those areas. And then in the northeastern portion of the corridor, as you approach the Castle Hills area, this is the one segment of the corridor that is 2 lanes in either direction. The rest of the corridor through Lewisville primarily is 3 lanes in either direction. And this segment up here in the northeastern portion of the corridor feels very rural in nature. You don't have curb and gutter. It's a very different look and feel and experience in that area. So looking at opportunities, knowing that we're constrained with right-of-way and with what are some changes that could potentially be made to that roadway section in that northeastern portion. So diving a little bit deeper, as we look at the access management goal to better balance access and traffic flow. Again, I mentioned driveway consolidation. There are instances where there's multiple access points to a single business. But then on the flip side of that, there are some instances where within 2 adjacent commercial properties, you have to go in and out. So in one property and then back onto the corridor. So looking at opportunities to improve cross access between businesses as well. And then there are some instances of within the right-of-way, there are obstructions, such as vehicles that are parked that cause obstructions for access points as well. In terms of safety, obviously safety is an issue along the entire corridor, but some potential strategies or ideas we're looking at is where there maybe are additional U-turns that should be prohibited either at signalized intersections or even at median breaks. That was something we talked about earlier today, so really want to discourage those U-turning movements at the median breaks just due to visibility and safety issues. Michaela touched on pedestrian crossing improvements. So kind of the low-touch, low-hanging fruit would be looking at your existing signalized intersections, making improvements there. When we did our intersection audits, there's a lot of issues related to some ADA issues, as well as things like faded striping or lack of pedestrian signals. So focusing first on your signalized intersections can help with those pedestrian crossing improvements. In an ideal world, there would be sidewalks along the entire stretch of the corridor, but we know in reality that's not feasible. So also through this process, we want to identify the priority areas to fill in sidewalk gaps. In terms of traffic flow, at opportunities to optimize signal timing along the corridor. We actually had an interesting discussion earlier today with our corridor advisory committee about kind of what the future vision of the corridor is. So on the one hand, if you want to prioritize the pedestrian, that would entail potentially slowing down traffic, potentially adding another signal where there is there's kind of a large gap in between signals, so there would be an additional opportunity for pedestrian crossing. But that's in conflict of the other primary users of the corridor, which are the motorists. So that through traffic that's trying to utilize Business 121. So I think that's an interesting balance that we need to continue to explore as we finalize this corridor study. Since this is a longer-term study, we're also kind of thinking bigger and more visionary as well. So I mentioned there is a bottleneck on the southern end of the corridor as you go south of Round Grove, and so looking at some potential options to start to alleviate some of the congestion in that area. A lower touch option would be to sorry, the pointer is not working on here, but as folks are traveling on the SRT frontage road here, they have to go up here and sit at the light at Edmonds before they can make a U-turn here to travel to the south. So long-term, looking at a potential for a dedicated U-turn turning lane there that would help relieve some of that congestion. And then a big grand idea might be to look at actually depressing the main lanes of Business 121 in that area. There is precedent of TxDOT doing that with other state highways in the area. One example is FM 2499 in Grapevine, near Grapevine Mills. So the main lanes were depressed, sunken, and then the frontage roads are outgrade and provide the cross access to other roadways. So obviously it's a big idea, but it would help alleviate that bottleneck there. And this type of plan is, a great place to introduce that idea and could potentially, look at implementation in the future. And then this last idea here, I talked about the northeastern portion of the study area where you have 2 travel lanes in either direction and pretty large right-of-way within that area. You have pretty much continuous shoulder in that area. There's no curb and gutter continuously, no curb and gutter, and very few sidewalks within that area. So very much a rural cross-section today. So looking at potential to, if TxDOT were to make improvements in the future, explore an alternative roadway section that would include things like curb and gutter and continuous sidewalks to make it more suburban in nature. So those are some of the initial framework goals and ideas for strategies. So we wanted to pause here and just get initial thoughts and reactions to both the neighborhood and mobility goals and see if either council or P&Z have any thoughts, comments, suggestions. Are we moving in the right direction? Something you thought?
I have a question.
Yes.
So have you talked to TxDOT yet about some of the possibilities of whether or not they're open to some of the ideas of maybe changing the section or adding a signal? Because I know they have spacing requirements for some of that, so I don't know where we stand on that.
So TxDOT is, there are, I think, 2 representatives that are serving on our corridor advisory committee, and we have had some touch points with them. Obviously, before we finalize any sort of plan, we will want additional input from them as well. Okay. But they have been involved up to this point.
So far you haven't heard anything from them that says we couldn't do that?
Not so far, but we haven't, they saw, Michelle, they were on the line, right? Yeah, they were on the call today, so we'll certainly follow up with them and see if they have any additional feedback at this point.
Okay.
I know that you mentioned that you were looking to adding ways for pedestrians on the Business 121. Has there been consideration about also lighting in that area? Because I know that the lighting is difficult sometimes when people are crossing from the CVS or that other apartment complexes down there, they're I don't know if they're jaywalking, but they're walking across, and it's kind of dangerous when you're going 50, going to 45 miles an hour.
Yes, that was probably one of the most common things we've heard was the need for lighting throughout this process. So that will definitely be part of the overall strategies is to look at implementing more lighting along the corridor, particularly in those areas where there is a lot of pedestrian activity in the corporate drive area.
Mary, can I add something to that? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say also for background information, so we didn't want to wait just for the plan to move forward with the lighting because we know that is a critical issue out there. So we have just applied, well not just, we previously, I would say in the last 6 months have applied for a grant with TxDOT to get lighting out there and decorative lighting as well. Is that they're going to be solar is what we're requesting. It's looking good that we're going to get it. We should hear, I just got an email today before this meeting saying it's looking good. It's not official yet, but we'll get word over the next month or so.
And who would maintain those lights? To TxDOT make them?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I don't know the answer. I have to get you that.
So I have another question. So, or maybe it's more of a comment. I have, you mentioned on that stretch where we've got like almost half a mile in between signals. I know we talked about maybe adding some mid-block crossings. I'm worried about if it's anything other than a signal that makes cars stop. I'm worried about that because they're not going to stop. They're going way too fast, and if we have a pedestrian crossing there, and people have still gotten hit at those hop crossings, I'm afraid that what it's going to do is it's going to make people feel that they're safe to cross there, but I'm afraid the cars aren't going to stop unless it's a signalized intersection. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about earlier today that isn't in this slide deck is maybe a longer-term vision might be the opportunity for a pedestrian bridge in that area as well. So even if
I'm doing that in some places. Safety reasons. I wouldn't go under.
It's a visibility thing.
Well, visibility thing. There's a safety thing.
You can make it something though.
We could do something, but I'd be real cautious about going under.
I have a couple questions here. So first off, I'm always astounded at the amount of work that goes into this kind of stuff. It looks great. I appreciate the detail and the effort that you guys put into this. The color, a few slides back, we talked about colored streets. This is way back, so you don't have to go back to them, but you don't want to. We did this when I was on the arts board. We had colored walkways, and they wore pretty badly. They don't look so great right now. Has that been considered? Is there a way to keep them from wearing, or is maybe given thoughts to how to keep those things from wearing out in the 6 months, year time frame?
At NCL and at TML, there were several booths that had those more permanent. It costs more than paint, but it lasts longer than 6 months.
It's a thermoplastic.
Yes.
Awesome. So we have options for that. And then the other thing that I was wondering is that you defined like 9 different place types. Mm-hmm. Are those already reconciled to zoning, or do we have to go back and do that?
So for some portions of the corridor, if this is the ultimate place type framework map that gets adopted within the corridor study, there are some areas that the zoning would need to be adjusted. So it's really looking towards the future. So it's not just what's there today, but what could be envisioned in the future.
Can I have clarity on this? I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. So like with our Old Town Master Plan, we did a plan that showed we want this all to be Old Town mixed use too. That didn't automatically change it, but it is up to you guys whether or not you want to rezone that in the future. The plan does not dictate you have to do it. It's just if you want it. I mean, this is obviously the goal in mind, and you guys will make that decision.
I had a question regarding speed limits, because you mentioned something that you didn't quite say it, but is there an option for us to consider to lower the speed limit, especially through the more urban areas where we have a lot of people crossing the street? Is that something that TxDOT would allow us to do?
I think that's a potential discussion item with them, yes, and I think based on, what the overall recommendations from this plan are, that can be used to further those conversations with TxDOT.
I went out with the police not too long ago, and we were just trying to make a U-turn on Business 121, and we sat there forever because we couldn't even get across half the street in a car. So, because people were just coming so fast. So I don't know. I feel like that would help a lot if we could lower the speed limit through there.
And I just wanted to add, earlier at the CAC meeting, I was sitting next to Officer Rachel Roberts, and we both came to the realization that West Main, west of I-35, is the exact same cross-section, 6 lanes, but it's speed limit 40. It has a very regular rhythm of traffic signals. About every quarter mile, you've got a traffic signal. And when you think about the high schools there, it has a lot of pedestrian activity. We don't have near the pedestrian accidents on that stretch of road, comparing it to Business 121. So maybe we can kind of learn something from the way West Main exists.
And if we could get the signals synced up with each other along the corridor, it might not be as bad to go through there. I mean, you could go through it at a slower pace, but you're catching 2 or 3 lights at a time, so it's really not taking you longer to get through there.
And Officer Reynolds also noted too that on West Main, pedestrians use the crosswalks at the signals.
Yeah.
She said, jaywalking is fairly rare.
We have more signals.
Exactly.
But we also have sidewalks.
Half a mile to go.
And continuous sidewalks.
We all have, there's continuous sidewalks there, which is not the case here.
But they're not crossing the street mid-block to get to a sidewalk. They're crossing because they're like, well, I don't want to walk half a mile that way to cross and then come back this way to get to this business and then go back that way. They're not going to do that.
Can you go forward a little bit to the roadway? That there. I think that's there. So any idea about 121 Business and 35, that area where traffic's congested as you go try to get on 35 south and north right there? I think you had that in red. This may not be the right map, but...
This one?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes, this map is showing average observed speeds during a typical week. So the red areas are your lower speeds, and then your yellow areas are a little bit higher. Generally, this does correspond with what the speed limits are along the corridor. Your speed limits are higher in this portion, and then as you get closer to 35, it does drop down. But yes, this does indicate that there's typically more congestion in this area as well. So I think there are some other projects that are going on in this area, like the Mill Street realignment and then the I-35 project as well.
I think we definitely got to solve. Nobody wants to go that way.
But that's all, TxDOT's about to tear all that up right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be a huge improvement once the new overpass is put in, new frontage roads, everything will be realigned.
Out of that.
It'll be greatly improved and much more functional.
So I just want to go back to the light for a second, because we definitely need the lights on the southern part. But also going into the Castle Hills area, it is pitch black at night. And
that's terrible. That's a rural aesthetic. That's what she said earlier.
Well, it's a scary aesthetic when you're alone and have a flat tire.
Yeah, but it's needing to be.
It needs a little bit more light and search. It doesn't have to be fully lit up like a highway, but it needs some sections in there where you can see. Because I drive it pretty regularly, and it's like at night, fire everywhere because you never know what you're going to run into. But I mean, we probably need to phase this, probably starting from the old town area, and either
kind of work our way out.
Start working out from there, because there's going to be plenty of work south with the businesses, and we got a lot of things building up over there. We got new apartments coming up over there, so that has some time. So we can start with the Old Town and the Valley Parkway, and then start working whichever way works faster. Just get it done. But I just wanted to make sure, like we're talking about the lights on the south end, but drive that sucker at night.
We definitely have a need to.
Can I ask that clarity from the group?
Sure.
Because I think there has been an intentionality, especially from our sustainability and our natural preserve aspect, to keep less lights up there because of it's being adjacent to Lula. So I would like to get input from the group if y'all don't want that. I mean, I think it's from a preservation and birds and animals.
Right. I can see that by the nature preserving going over the dam area and stuff like that, but the rest of that,
when you hit Parker.
Yeah. Okay.
And even if
It's
you
not
have
even
lights on
Parker.
one side going toward the marsh.
What's the intersection we put the light on before Parker? What's it called? Holford's Prairie. From about Holford's Prairie on.
Yeah, Holford's Prairie. Well, I'd go Huffines on, because you're talking about, you have the ag and you still have Leland and everything right there. I mean, I've stopped, I don't know how many times for deer to go across the road.
Yeah. The multifamily along in there, though, is adding some
need for lighting.
Well, directional lighting maybe on that.
Correct.
I think for me, and I think you hit on it, there are some sections along there that are, that rural, no curb, and there are many people that are paying the price for that with their tires. You can see some of the construction where, it's got a line, and it's got cones, and it's got barrels, and it's got divots of cars that are just hitting it.
And that one is about
that one is
this deep now.
Yeah, so
we got a plan for that. Patrick's looking at me. He's been asking me about
That's right. It's only a year.
It's only a year.
I don't know if we got to put barbed wire up or something.
A developer's going to do that improvement out there. They're just finishing up.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Have you hit it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've come very close.
So.
It's before you get to the racetrack.
That's right.
We all know exactly where it's at.
Yes.
Well, I think I'm not hearing additions. I'm hearing emphasis on what's already here. Are there any additions? Can we go back to the action questions at the end?
Before we go, I want to ask a question with the picture here. So we did a study out there, TechSide did a study yesterday, and then Jim went out and cut holes in that study. The timing of the study was not optimal. The timing of that study was like during the day, and then especially between Castle Hills and over here, it's really backed up. So when I see average speeds, I don't know that average speeds, when I look at it, maybe look at worst speeds, for between where's your highest traffic. So just something I want to put out there. Maybe you already did that.
That's some additional data we can look into. Good point.
Let's go back to the task at hand, last slide. Any elements that are missing, folks, where you don't feel that this necessarily aligns with what we're trying to do? These are the great thinkers of Lewisville. I need your input.
I don't think there's any major elements missing.
No, I feel like you captured.
I think we.
You're on the right. You're definitely on the right track. So, for sure.
Definitely.
20,000 feet once we get started focusing, and we'll see.
Before we go on to the next subject, we had a really good statement made by our senior planner, John Beckham, at our last meeting. Could you just paraphrase the question that you posed to the group about us being at a crossroads and what this wants to be?
All right, basically, the point I brought up was whether or not we wanted this to be a highway, what it traditionally was, or a road through our town. So right now it's functioning like a highway. We have some pushback about adding new lights and everything because that's limiting the through traffic. But should this really be through traffic? We have I-35, we have Sam Rayburn. It's already built where we have options for through traffic, but we're still seeing Business 121 as a highway. Even though south of I-35, we have a lot of density and we have a lot of pedestrians crossing there. So we know that it's a wall for people, yet we're still looking at it as a through Lewisville and a highway. Which
I would love for it to be a road and not a massive highway thoroughfare. That was the whole reason for the SRT to be built, is to turn,
Be careful what you ask for, Terry.
Jonathan, what's the impact when we finally finish Corporate Drive? Will that pull anything off of, do we feel that would make a change? Will that make a change in that?
Not long term.
So,
It may disperse things a little bit.
I'm almost getting started, it'll turn it into more of a highway now.
So the consultants actually did look at that a little bit, Kendall.
Yes, so we have looked at the NCT COGS regional travel demand model forecast. So they do have the extension of Corporate Drive modeled in their future network. And it really does not, looking out to 2045, it really does not impact the travel along Business 121 to a great degree.
I do love the concept of it being a road, but I don't know. I've always viewed traffic as being organic and taking the path of least resistance. I think about, I remember when I was at A&M, they built some new buildings up, they put in no sidewalks. I said, well, why no sidewalks? I said, we're going to wait and see where the students plow through them, and then we're going to put the sidewalks there. So I don't know if we can control whether it's a road or a highway. I think the traffic is going to organically go where it's going to go.
Now, to give you my take on it, for what it's worth, whenever I see a road that says Business 121, Business 114, the business means that this is not really a freeway. It's designed to keep businesses and more of the traditional types of uses as opposed to a freeway. So I'm not asking for it to be taken off net.
Right. But there is a difference.
But this road is for accessing businesses as you're traveling between cities, whereas 121, I'm going between cities. I'm moving. I have to get to McKinney. I have to get to Frisco. I'm not looking for a business opportunity or a gas station or any of that. The business component to me says slower speeds, more mixed use, more interactions with the stuff that's on that road versus the corridor for traffic.
But
that's how I always see it.
That comes from your knowledge and life experience, too, that a lot of people don't have. So they're going to go speeding up and down Business 121 because they don't want to have to pay the toll on the SRT.
Sure. But that goes back to design and the question of what kind of road do we want. That goes back. So.
And sinking those lights may be a thing that may alleviate the...
The lights will get better. I mean, the technology is much better now.
Because I know RBC is getting grants for that.
I think we're okay as far as, I do like that question. I think that's an important way that we vision that space is, are we visioning it as a way to get from one to another, or are we visioning it as a way to create commerce and other opportunities to visit Lewisville? In all of our conversations, it feels like it's the latter, not the former. So that's my take. And of course, now we get into catalytic sites, and it's definitely the latter and not the former, because those catalytic sites only work if people are using them, not if cars are driving by them.
True.
Yes. So great segue, Mayor. Thank you. So we first introduced the catalytic at the council retreat, and so before we dive into the draft scenarios, we did just want to give some market context. So our partners at SB Friedman did do some economic forecasting for the corridor area in terms of both residential and retail demand. So this is looking at potential residential demand through the year 2045 and looking at historic growth rates and what the capture rate within the corridor study area has been historically. And so by the year 2045, there's a demand for an additional roughly 1,200 residential units within the corridor study area. That's projected to be roughly split between multifamily and single family, and the majority of it could be accommodated within these two residential investment areas with near Old Town Station and then near the Crown Center development. So that's on the residential side. And then for retail demand within the corridor study area, there's demand for approximately 100,000 square feet of additional retail within the study area within that time frame that could be accommodated through different types like general merchandise, food and beverage, food and drinking services, and then miscellaneous retail. But just something to keep in mind as we walk through these catalytic sites is within the corridor study area today, there's also about 100,000 square feet of vacant retail. So there's a lot of vacant retail that we need to contend with as well as we think about these catalytic sites. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott. This is just an overall map orienting you, again, to the 3 sites that we're looking at. I'll turn it over to Scott to talk through the scenarios.
Good evening. Go through this pretty quickly because this is really more about application and starting a conversation. So all of the ideas that Michaela and Kendall have been talking about with respect to the roadway or how it should look and feel, what does it really mean when you zoom into each of these sites and think about what each of those conditions are, particularly in light of the market? And you just mentioned the market for retail is really limited. That's not a Lewisville problem, that's a national problem. So keeping that in mind, and also the fact that there's a lot of private ownership embedded within some of these catalytic sites, and so that adds an additional layer of complexity in terms of thinking about how these things change over time. So there's really 2 big pieces to each of these catalytic sites. There's a question around how does it look and feel, which is really about infrastructure, sidewalks, signage, lighting, things you all have already talked about. And then there's a question of land use, right? How could it be used in the future? So the first one is the Mill Street area. It's right now LISD property, it's a pawn shop, it's a collection of other properties, some of which are active or older commercial businesses and older buildings, right? You're all pretty familiar with this. You know what it looks like. We're going to keep going. I want to focus, though, on getting to that first question, right? How does this look and feel a little bit better, potentially, without thinking about land use? So some of what we would think about is certainly this Mill Street alignment is a great first move, because it is now signaling a new entry into Old Town. It's something that can be really prominent, and we would want to make the most of this gateway. So if we're thinking about lighting, signage, pedestrian crossings, things to make it easier for people to access Old Town, we want to make the most of that intersection. We also want to look at extending sidewalks where they don't exist, and of course making connections with trails to existing parks, things that are all within the area. It's really an opportunity to connect some of the dots. But then in terms of thinking about land use, it gets a little trickier. Because as I said, it's this collection of private properties, some of which are active, some of which are not. Sorry, we just talked about it. I'm going to skip ahead. And I think it's really important to think about land use kind of long term. And so we drew up 2 options just for what if we thought about the sites like this, or what if we thought about it like that. So in this scenario, we're thinking about what if we brought a lot more of the Old Town kind of investment closer to 121? So this is assuming 121 feels more like a road and not a highway, and that there's some potential mixed use on either side of this gateway so that it really, whoops, what did I do? Touched it. I didn't mean to touch it. There we go. Either side of that gateway, you have something that's really visually prominent that would welcome you into Old Town and say, look, this is a really important moment in Lewisville. And then the rest of the site could be redeveloped over time as commercial, including even potentially reusing one of the LISD buildings as a grocery, which I think was its use like many, many moons ago. The other option is frankly not my favorite, because it really says, let's take mixed use off the table. Let's look at more small scale, new industrial and new retail. This is one of those few places where the limited amount of retail might be a good idea because it's really visible and it is a gateway to Old Town. But on the flip side, you're tearing down older buildings to replace them with newer buildings. Different property owners have to agree and decide this is in their best interest over time. This is complicated. And there's just not a lot of new development to offset the work that it will take to move those properties right forward into something that would be different. But I wanted to put those both out there just to get you thinking about ways of considering how these properties could change. I'm going to go through the exact same thing for Lakeland and Bel Air. Right, where right now we have some collection of vacant property or vacant storefronts within these uses, but also some active stores. You've seen it all before, right? Also a lot of parking. And this is something we talked about at the last meeting. where some of this parking, which is really more than these uses currently need, could be repurposed into something else, whether that's new development or it's park space that would add value to these surrounding uses. I think there are options there for how to think about that, but of course it requires the property owner to say, yeah, I'm in, and this is what I'm willing to do, right, to help make that happen. This is from a former framework plan here in Lakeland that showed actually these two properties with a whole network of streets. And so the idea here is, of course, getting to the infrastructure piece. How do we make this look and feel a little bit different? We really care about how it looks and feels against the highway, because that is a pretty prominent edge with lots of traffic. And right now it feels sort of back of house to these properties. But also really making the most of Bel Air Boulevard and really improving this one north-south connection that would be the street that connects both of these properties. So potentially that it feels a lot more connected than it does today. But then if we think about this in the future, how would this maybe change in terms of land use? There could be some opportunity over time to think about this becoming housing or mixed use or some mix of both, so that we're bringing more vibrancy to the site and then adding in some new retail and spaces that are either currently empty or undeveloped within that property. The advantage there is that there's so much parking on each of those properties, we likely don't have to build new parking to support new uses. So it makes it a little bit more of an economic benefit to invest. The other option doesn't change much at all, except maybe thinks about reusing the buildings in different ways. Our market partners said maybe that's a community amenity, like an event space. Folks at the last meeting were like, we've got event spaces close by. Others suggested things like indoor recreation. But there are other alternatives that we can think about for these buildings if there are spaces that are continuously turning over, and we know that there are a few that are. Okay, and then the last one is the Southwest Parkway Plaza. Pretty small site, right? It's where Bayou Market is. It already has this green space, which is, I think, calling out for something a little bit more meaningful, particularly for folks that are living nearby. This could be one of those opportunities to provide some real green space for the community. So it was a lighter touch. We're like, okay, nothing changes, except maybe we're looking at doing pop-ups and programming that green space. I didn't even touch it that time. It's pretty sensitive.
You got it. Keep about that much space between your hand and the screen, because it looks like you're right against the screen when you're like a foot away from it.
Okay, I'll get it eventually. But also working with the property owner to look at improvements for lighting, and particularly around the facade and signage, because I think there's an opportunity to really make more of this space, particularly if there's an interest in investing in that green space as a community amenity. So it serves the businesses and it serves nearby residents. The longer-term option would be, what if the bank decided they didn't want to be there anymore, then we take that green space and really expand it. And then it becomes a true park space along 121 that's serving all of the nearby neighborhoods. We would, of course, want to think carefully about how folks are crossing 121 to make sure this is a safe amenity. But it could be something that's a benefit to a lot of different parties at the same time. So we put these out there really for discussion, because we, again, want to generate some discussion before we jump back in and say, okay, what are we really going to do in terms of the action steps, please?
I think that's great, but what about the elephant in the triangle that we haven't even discussed? Just on the other side, the Pines Motel.
Yeah.
There should be able to be something. I mean, I could see, he's not going to sell it, I know that.
Well, but I mean, the only business that benefits from it is Huffines. There's really...
I don't care, I mean, it's not historical by any means, but
it's not a great place for retail either.
It could be, if it's going to stay there, put lipstick on the daggum pig. Facade it, make it one of those vintage attraction areas, okay?
What I like about that point is you're reminding us, much like we are thinking about this with the other catalytic sites, that any investment here should be thinking about both sides of the street. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
It should be.
Just remember Millbank.
Because you know what, us that live on the east side, we're tired of everybody just thinking about the west side. Sorry, I had to say it. We still want that grocery store on the east side.
Can we go back?
I'm going to change myself to medium.
So I'm going to ask a question so everyone in the room says, Patrick, how do you not know this? I'm going to ask anyway. So we just had a big discussion about this with Marichelle. And I'm assuming she's been part of these discussions as well, because I can't remember if what she was proposing was different than this or the same as this, but I'm assuming this is a coordinated effort.
Yeah, economic development is part of our CAC,
Okay,
and they're definitely involved in all those conversations.
I figured, but I'd ask anyway.
Yeah, we've got the restaurants going in across the corner there where it says potential new retail. There's literally 3 new restaurants going in underneath that red block.
Under this one?
Yeah, no, under the text, under the text.
Oh, under the text. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the linkages, trying to figure out how to get that blue corridor to link better because they don't feel connected right now. So if there's a way to do that with art or graphics or sign wayfinding, I think that's awesome. I think we have to have a conversation maybe about Bel Air punching all the way through to the frontage road.
To me, that should be.
Yeah. Do we need that? Do we need that
It's
there?
so dangerous.
Yeah.
It is.
What, expanding it?
No.
No, that little car where people are, and then they sit there and they try to beat the traffic that's coming.
So the only one, dead end Bel Air, and
Make it a total green space right there.
have you go left or right, not have to get onto the frontage road. I don't know what the accident or travel. I know dead ending it, because dead ending anything will drive people crazy. But I don't know what we've got for accidents there or not.
I don't know.
Because it's an awkward corner, and I've done it. I mean, but yeah, you zip across the road, and you do this because the road's really bad there.
Yeah.
And then you get up to this weird corner, and you're looking way back over your shoulder because it's at an angle. To take a right-hand turn to zip up onto the frontage.
And I think it's really time for us to take a hard stance on the Pine Motel. Yeah, sorry.
What does that mean?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
It needs to go, or it needs to be where we use it, that we can ask, are you interested in a grant or something to make it just really cool?
So, absolutely. One of the things, obviously, we are in support of either getting it into the hands of the neighbors or a facade, like a complete redo. That would be very cool.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Again, it has to be, the property owner has to be willing to come to the table.
The thing about that is there's options for the city if the property owner is not willing and is holding up all kinds of things.
You want to own the Pine Motel? I'm just asking. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
What I said.
It sometimes depends on how many property owners you have to deal with, too.
Yeah, that's true, but we're only talking
I'll
about
just
one
give a
here.
counterpoint to Bel Air. I'm like, it's the weird angle of it that causes more problems.
Yeah, I'm not willing to kill it yet, but I want to see what the realignment does to all of that. But it's not great.
If they're going to keep it on that quick zip angle that you got to make, yeah, it probably would be better. But a lot of people, in the morning time, that's a lot of people's way to get to 35. And so that's going to create some log jams. But the way it's configured now is
The
terrible.
way it's configured is unsafe. There needs to be like a turnabout or something where you turn and
I don't know the answer to that.
something. I don't know.
Other comments on these 3 locations?
I think that the one by 35 at Lakeland Plaza is key because I think that will be like a domino effect. If we can get, and I think I know the owner is on that one, but if we can get that high corner going, that may help the other ones. The smaller one may be the easier one to start with, but so we can get them to see what it can potentially be. But if we get that corner, that's going to be a game changer for business.
I was just going to make a comment that I appreciate that you're incorporating in the art, because I know that it sounds like it's not a big deal, but it really does make a big difference with how people feel about being in that space. And so I really like that y'all are going there, and
Well, it helps with wayfinding immensely.
Yes.
Absolutely. You have some great opportunities in all of these areas for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like the other area too. I think you got a great opportunity on that market area. Bayou Market.
Bayou Market area.
That's already kind of getting a cult following, that Bayou Market, and obviously the Green Hall, right? You got a great opportunity to make that a great space there. I like the second version of that with that one.
I like that one. So on that, going with this version, if you go down Southwest Parkway, aren't they already building a park?
Glory Park.
Yeah, Glory Park's on the other end.
Do we want to have parks that close to each other?
Depends on how they're used, right? I would think of this park as something that's here to serve the businesses, but also be like an active kind of programming space for the community. As long as it's not competing with the other park, I think they can operate really well.
It's more of a food park almost, people to...
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
You know, you bring up the parking lots on these. I've lived here for 41 years, and I don't even know what's in those anymore.
Yeah.
I might have once, but it's all parking lot, and when I drive by there, it's so far back. It seems kind of dark, and I have no idea, and the signage is terrible. So there's nothing that pulls me to go there. But you have the same problem on Main Street in a few places as well. Not as bad as those, but people just go on by, have nothing that interests them. And we need to change. How do we get some interest in there? The markings on the buildings, they've got them dark. So when they have that dark lettering on there, I don't even know when you're driving in the car, I don't know what that says. So all I see is a whole bunch of concrete.
I agree. Yeah. Empty parking lots are like the worst advertising for a business.
They really are, and they've been that way since I've lived here.
And I think with the changes that we made to the UDC and allowing for less parking, I think what the next step for these targeted areas is to be able to go to those business owners and say, hey, look, you have an opportunity that's been created because of this, that you can put more rentable space here and not have to pay for parking. I mean, so let's talk about how we can, there's a built-in incentive in our UDC now to have these folks figure out how they can maybe do something different or better. So
drainage fees.
Yeah, the drainage fees would be reduced. Yeah, so there's some really good opportunities in our conversations, but I also know the limitations of staff. I like the idea that we're going to target specific areas because I just don't think we can hit everybody with that. Because I have the same issue with the strip center on the north side of the mall. It's just a giant sea of parking. You could double the density there, leave and not add any more parking, and it would be moving.
It's true.
Any other questions on these? Do we like these catalysts? Is there something you'd add? Something that's missing? I think we've covered it. Okay.
I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
So just a couple wrap-up slides here. We have talked about ArcGIS Urban before. So this is a web-based platform that we're using to model the corridor and to build the scenarios in this environment. It's a really great tool that you can set certain parameters for things like density and parking requirements, and it will spit out certain metrics. So as you change, go from different scenarios, you can look at how the metrics will change. So we're using it specifically for this project, but there's definitely potential applications for continued use at the city to visualize and model potential impacts of proposed development and redevelopment moving forward. We were going to do a demo of using ArcUrban, but I think just in the interest of time, we may skip that. Yeah, we can do it maybe at our next touch point. Kind of thinking through the next steps. So we appreciate all the feedback that we got tonight on kind of our initial ideas, and so our next steps will be to start to formalize those into specific strategies. So this slide just shows some of the example menu of tools that we'll look at as we develop those implementation strategies. So they could be related to regulatory changes, investments, partnerships, incentives, engagement, and monitoring. So as we move forward, we'll likely see a combination of these different tools to be able to realize the overall vision for the corridor. And so our next steps, we are going to be scheduling a second round of stakeholder focus group sessions. We initially had some back in September, and we had some good turnout. So we're going to invite those folks that participated last time back and try to cast a broader net as well. We'll work to refine the overall goals and strategies, and then based on the feedback that we got, work to finalize those scenario concepts for each of the catalytic sites. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and we're happy to answer any more questions.
I'm sure you'll wake up in the middle of the night going, I need to add an idea. So please let the team know as we go through this. I mean, this is the next big shift for the city. We've spent a lot of time down here in Old Town, and we know what that creates when you put a focus on an area. So I'm really excited about what we can create by putting another focus on a different part of the town that needs some love. So
good job.
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Is that all for item A? Yes. Okay, so item B, discuss and provide direction on adding smoking establishments as a use in the Unified Development Code. Do we need a 5-minute bio break?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, let's do a 5-minute bio break. We'll be right back at where are we? 7:15. I can't believe you used a hammer there, Mary Ellen.
I know. I'm out of control.
All right, folks, we're going to come back to this. We going to discuss and provide direction on adding smoking establishments as a use in the UDC. Take it away.
Hi, yes, so I wanted to discuss with you guys a proposed change to the Unified Development Code to create a new use category, which would be a smoking establishment. This would be defined basically to cover, it would reference the fire code, but it would cover a cigar bar, a cigarette lounge, a hookah lounge, any place where the primary activity is really consumption of tobacco or other smoking products on site. Obviously, tobacco is an age-controlled substance, and so there's some concerns with age-controlled substances. For example, a bar in the Unified Development Code requires an SUP in most zoning districts in zoning districts where it's allowed, it requires an SUP because, again, you've got an age-controlled substance you're consuming on site. With smoking, you also, there's odors and fumes and things that are associated with that as well. And so we wanted to get direction from the P&Z and the council about creating that use that would capture, very clearly capture any hookah lounges, cigar bars, cigarette lounges, those types of things, clearly use, and then require a special use permit for those uses in the general business, light industrial, Old Town mixed use 2, and mixed use zoning districts, which roughly aligns with where we allow bars with an SUP or a special use permit. And just as a reminder, a special use permit always has 2 public hearings, one with the Planning and Zoning Commission where a recommendation is made and one with the City Council. We can, with the special use permit tool, adopt additional conditions that are necessary for the health and safety of the surrounding properties and so forth. So I just wanted to get some feedback on that proposal from you all tonight.
So I had a question on specifically the cigar bars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do they have any requirements for like an air filtration? Because I was at a place, actually a town very close to us, I will remain nameless. I was in a restaurant next to a cigar bar, and you could smell the smoke coming in from there. So we could, like, I know there's one that's supposed to be coming sometime, but this one is by itself. But the hookah lounge, I know one of the hookah lounges is next to other establishments. Do we have any requirements for that or no?
So we haven't drafted in any requirements into the actual text of the ordinance for that right now. I'm not sure if there's anything in the fire code.
There's no provisions for mechanical ventilation in the smoking ordinance right now.
And so that's something.
Is there any provisions that we cannot regulate that? There's nothing in the law that says this is hands off right now?
So
you said that word.
I think what we could do is we could look at smoking and we could look at ventilation systems, especially if it's part of a tenant lease space and not a standalone structure where you would be concerned about that odor and fume kind of traveling within the building. We could look at that as SUPs are requested, and that could potentially be a condition that they have to provide that ventilation. And then with the SUP, obviously we have the public hearing, so hopefully the existing tenants see the sign that gets posted on the site, even if they don't get a letter because they're not a property owner.
So, I'm sorry, were you finished? Okay. So for typically these smoking establishments, do they have operating hours that are similar to bars, or they go later than bars? What's the...
So the cigar bar that we have is going to do like I want to say it's like a 10 a.m. to a 10 p.m. type time frame. There are some places that were functioning like nightclubs in terms of both their hours of operations and what was happening on the site. But again, with the special use permit process, we could ask for those things if that is a concern based on the site and the use specifics.
So we could regulate the operating hours?
So the one existing cigar bar and the one coming in, both of those are TABC permitted facilities, so they will be regulated by TABC hours. Whether they go late hours or not, that's up to their decision, but...
That's a good point.
Is that because, they serve alcohol?
That's because they are serving alcohol, yes.
Okay, so but TABC doesn't have any regulation over if it's a BYOB?
Correct.
But we do. I was going to say, with smoking establishments, with any, like Dallas regularly has hours of operation, if it makes sense and there's a basis for why you're regulating hours of operation for any of the uses that you have. It's not something we've done, but it is something, if you can tie it to a reason, a rationale, you can do hours of operation.
So if we did an SUP for a smoking establishment, we could say that the minimum age to get in is 18. So you could we? I'm asking. That's a question.
If it's a TABC license place?
No, I'm talking about a BYOB place that is allowing kids who are younger than 18 to go in.
So I think when we go through our SUP process, it gives us an opportunity to conditions, and we can run those all by legal as those come up. I don't see a compliance with laws with regard to laws is something that you can't put in there. That's a common thing. You have to comply with all state laws and access to that space if you're under 18. And there's a law related to that. That makes sense to me. So we can go through all of those. This just gives us an ability to put conditions, reasonable conditions on them that we don't have right now.
So what you're saying is that you don't know.
I don't have an answer without going through legal on all the conditions, but
okay. So we don't know if.
But as it is today,
we don't know if we can do that or not. But
as it is today, we can have these, but we have no opportunity to regulate.
That's right.
Right.
So this creates a framework that we can create regulations off of.
I have a problem with having these establishments operating as a club, a bar, but it's the BOB thing, BYOB thing, I have a huge issue with.
Do you want me to speak to that, Claire? Or, oh no.
Not the BYOB stuff?
Yeah.
We're working on a separate
Okay, thank you.
BYOB.
Enough said.
so that's completely separate from this.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because this is a smoking app. It's not bring your own bong, it's bring your own bottle.
Bong?
Because we're dealing with smoking.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm channeling my inner Liz here. We can't talk about the bring your own bottle. We got to talk about the smoking piece.
Lord,
Yeah, yeah, Lubbock shut theirs down too, so we're fine. So I think in general, I'm hearing that people are okay with creation of this as something in our unified dependent code.
I think we need it.
Yeah, okay. Super. Is that all you need?
That's all I needed.
All right, you got direction. All right. As there is no further action to be taken on this agenda, we are adjourned as far as the council is concerned. Thank you, ma'am. 7:24.